Okay, it's all yours, Aaron.
Okay, great. Well, Kevin, thank you for the nice introduction. It's my pleasure to join today and share a little about my experience and my experience in Oregon. Um, my name is Erin Steins, as you mentioned, and I've been at Westcor for a while. Welcome to our Westcor webinar, Behind the Policy, Tales from a Title Insurance Underwriter. As background, I've been working in the title insurance industry since about 2005. I worked for a judge for a couple years and then I landed in a real estate firm. Um, and that's pretty much where I learned all about title insurance. It wasn't exactly where I had set my sights I was in law school, but I loved real estate. I studied a variety of different courses, land use, all a variety of different payments law is where I actually met my husband. That related, it seemed at the time, to real estate. So I really wanted to get involved in that industry, and I'm super glad that I did. I started out in a law firm in Seattle as an associate. I was first barred in Washington. I later became barred in Oregon and then in Idaho. Once I left private practice, I started working for a large underwriter as in-house litigation counsel. And for about, I'd say, almost 15 years, I litigated title insurance claims, traveling around to state and federal courts in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, uh, just litigating anything to do with title insurance and escrow. And I started underwriting about 5 years ago. And now, and honestly, this is the best job that I've ever had in title insurance. I love claims prevention. I love talking to people about scenarios. And I think drawing on all those years of experience of fighting about things that have gone the wrong way, it is really important to me to keep things on track and help ensure that your transactions are not going to come back to haunt you. As we get a little closer to Halloween, I started thinking about all these kind of like goofy Halloween references. But yes, it is kind of haunting to think about some of the title insurance claims. But I have some interesting claims to share with you today, and some content is based on the kinds of questions I'm fielding lately in Oregon and specifically in Deschutes County. There's a lot of information here, but I want to keep this interesting and interactive. So please feel free to join in with any questions at any time or save them to the end. Um, and honestly, the best way for me to learn about title insurance was through the claims practice. And that being said, I'd like to jump right in. I got an email last week, and I think that's just a great way to start. That's often how I become aware of transactions that need some guidance is through email. The other way, just picking up the phone and calling me. So I encourage the title agents that I work for to reach out early and often. Don't be afraid. There is never a silly question. Well, sometimes it's silly. Yes, okay. Sometimes it's silly, but it's never a dumb question because I like to have a lot of fun as I do my job. Otherwise, this just is not dull to me. But I encourage questions all the time. This particular situation that came up last week, it came from a referral, and I love this clip art that I found of the referral with the microscope. So I love referrals. We all love referrals. Referrals are like gold in this business world, in our real estate industry, and title insurance and escrow is no, and underwriters. It's the same. Title companies and their underwriters love referrals. Westcor has national agents. We are a national underwriter. We have national agents that are working throughout the country, and occasionally they have deals in parts of the world they know absolutely nothing about. So we help them find homes for their deals. And I did get an email from Florida, our home office last week, and it said there in the bottom, a national agent. It simply said, need a referral for a title company for a client. It was completely vague. I had no idea, but I am a good soldier and I just immediately want to find a happy home for everybody and everybody's deal. So, we quickly all got to work to find a home for this particular transaction. We found an agent. The title officer there and the manager were ready to help us get this deal done quickly. We understood that it was something that had to get done right away. And then I got a hold of the title officer And we got on the phone and she said, "Hey, Erin, I know where this property is. And can we talk about this? Because I have some concerns." And so we started talking about it. She knew where it was. She knew the woman that actually owned the property had purchased it for her daughter. The mom was wheelchair bound. The property was in disrepair. It still had quite a bit of value, but nothing had been done with it. And the buyer was an LLC formed in Delaware, but not local to the community. Nobody knew anything about this Delaware LLC. And as we peeled into it, it looked like maybe it was a flip, and then we started reviewing the documents, and there was an assignment in there. So it started getting a little more layers of complication, I guess. And then there was a power of attorney. There were a few red flags, and not alone. Any one of these things might not have been a red flag, but sometimes that's how these deals work. They just begin layering themselves, and one red flag on top of one red flag, or something that is just once you want to get a little more information about. So we had a buyer that when an LLC, nobody had heard about it from, we don't know, and there was potentially a flip here. And the assignment was to a politician's ex-husband who had been in a fair amount of bankruptcy problem. And I started doing a bunch of Google research, and the mom had no idea that there would be an assignment. And then we looked at the purchase and sale agreement, and it was for way less than the Zillow or the Redfin value. So we started asking a bunch of questions. And once we started asking a bunch of questions, and I wasn't ready to say no to the deal. I just wanted to get some questions answered. And so when these referrals come in, and they can come in, maybe you deal with referrals, our local agents are dealing with referrals, and that just happens to be my example from last week. But it comes in so vague. Need a referral for a title company for a client. So my first question was, well, who sent this email? Do I even know who that person was, or what are the transaction details? As we peeled into them, but we were 5 people down the line, and we had probably spent 5 hours trying to find a home for this thing without anybody having looked at all the transaction details. Where is the property is important. Not because we're profiling properties. It doesn't have to be expensive for it to matter, but it's just part of our business. We like to know about property. I'm fascinated by property. I want to know where it is, who's been living there, if we know, or why is this coming to us. So anyway, we started peeling into it. We asked a lot of questions, and then we never heard from them again. But some investigation later, we discovered the ultimate buyer, who this was going to be assigned to, had already been purchasing a number of properties in that county, all of which were previously uninsured by the title company. Now, it seems to me this buyer could have just gone to his own local title company, but for whatever reason, he went to a national agent, and it was routed through Florida, our headquarters, and then it was routed back to us. So it's awesome that we kind of have boots on the ground, and we have these trusted sources in our community, and we don't want to be super insular where we're not excited to invite some business from out of state or different referral sources, but we just have to be careful in terms of what exactly we're looking for. And I love this quote. A recommendation is the sincerest form of flattery. Dale Carnegie. We can attribute that quote to him. He's the famous author of How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one way to win friends and the trust within our business is to completely understand a transaction before it's passed along. And whether it's being passed along to you, or you're passing it along to the title company is passing it along to their underwriter. We're all super busy, and as rates hopefully continue to go down, maybe we're going to be even a little busier here, and that's very exciting. But I would just, in my experience, the more we know about our deals, the more questions we can answer up front, the more seamless these transactions are completed, and everyone can go on their happy way. And I tell people consistently, become the expert of your own deal. I love becoming the expert of the deal, but honestly, it takes me a lot of time and I can't always kind of balance all of those things. And I certainly shouldn't be the stopgap in getting a deal done. I should, just here to weigh in, help navigate, um, take the law into account if we need to do that. Maybe look at the docket if there's a judgment involved, this, that, or the other, kind of higher level stuff. But hey, if you guys want to become the experts, that's awesome. I think that would be a great way to improve your practice if you're not always working there at that to achieve that on every deal. In this case, we are talking about, like I said, this probably going through 5 people and nobody really even looked at the facts of the transaction before we kind of took a bunch of people's time. And I had to go back to leadership to explain why we didn't end up closing this transaction, which seemed like a nice referral from a nice referral source. So if we're going to pass the torch, we want to know where the deal's coming from. And ultimately, also, I love the notion of building trust because it's just kind of an endless thing we can do. Keeping up with our promises to each other, like, hey, if I'm going to get this detail, if we're asking for more information, follow through. And that goes for everybody. And often I have to follow through on my promises, like, hey, I want to check this, I'll get back to you. Listening more than speaking. It's hard for me right now hearing my voice talk so much because I do love to listen to people. I love to hear about what's going on in the offices in a busy title and escrow practice, like into shoots, and soliciting constantly feedback, showing appreciation for people that are willing to give you all those details, being consistent in your own practice. I like to, when someone first starts telling me about a deal, I like to kind of go in order of who are the parties, where is the property, what's going on, when are we trying to close. I try to be consistent in the questions I'm asking, just so I have like a template for reviewing, uh, you know, and making a decision more quickly. For me, having a format, it seems like a great idea, and then just communicating effectively I'm a big fan of that. Trying to reduce the amount of words and just, hey, let's be quickly and acting quickly and efficiently in our communication. And again, just who are the parties involved? I just did this quick slide. Where are they? Who's the contact? Is a power of attorney requested? Why are the parties selling? What's the history on the property? Does the sales price make sense? In the little fact scenario that we were just talking about, a power of attorney was involved in that case, and that was one of the red flags. And I want to talk a little bit about powers of attorney because I get questions about our power of attorney, if not every day lately, just about every day. They've really, I mean, we've been using them for a long time, but for some reason they've really come into fashion. And in certain places more than others too. Here in Washington, where I live, there are certain counties where I can't remember the last time someone asked me to rely on a power of attorney in Deschutes. It seems like I'm being asked to rely on a power of attorney in a transaction at least once a week. So that's also, some of these geographic differences are super interesting to me. But just as a refresher, there are typically 3 types of a power of attorney. A general power is one which grants the attorney, in fact, unlimited authority to use their own discretion to act on behalf of someone, the principal. But we have to make sure we read these carefully when used to sell or purchase real property, because we want to see the specific grant of that authority, that we have to take a look at that. General powers are not my favorite when it comes to real estate. I'd rather see the next kind of power of attorney, which is the specific power of attorney. It's awesome if it's specific over one deal, and we're talking about certain specified action as for a certain task, which typically in our industry is to sell or buy a house. And the durable power of attorney is the last type. in respect to a power of attorney means that it's not terminated on that principal's incapacity. So if you later become incapacitated and you've signed a durable power of attorney, then the power of attorney, it will still work. There's a bunch of common reasons that I hear on a kind of a regular basis for giving a power of attorney. Regular travel, we have a lot of folks, maybe go to Arizona for the winter. I like the winter season. As you see, I'm a big winter person, so I can't wait for the snow. You won't be catching me in Arizona asking a power of attorney while I'm down there. But there are a lot of people, there's travel involved wherever, cruises. That's a reason. Upcoming surgeries, maybe planning to be in the hospital for some period of time. Maybe you're having financial difficulties or someone is having that problem and they need someone else to manage their finances for their parents, maybe, for example. There could be a variety of circumstances. Or maybe there's a chronic illness, memory impairment. You can arrange to have a power of attorney to manage your affairs while you're focusing on your health. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Chemotherapy, there's a variety of different reasons, and memory impairment, and so that is the most common, although the travel one comes up a lot for me. And so I really love to know why. Here's the next slide. These are the questions that I ask myself. And so if you already know the answers to these questions, then the title officer that I'm talking to won't have to go back and be like, okay, why do we need a power of attorney? If someone doesn't have dementia and they're not on vacation and they're not having any of these other reasons we just looked at, the preference is always to have the parties sign their own documents, sign their own names. Underwriters love that. We want to build security into these transactions. We want to build a transaction where it's reliable, you're selling it, whatever's happening, the people that are buying it, nothing comes back. We don't have a claim. We don't have to talk about this anymore. We can just move on down the road. I used to work for this manager, and he said title insurance and is a little like making tacos. I don't know, maybe he loved tacos or something, but his was like, okay, do you want tomato, cheese, move on. You don't want to have the taco come back on you or something like that, but maybe that's a silly reference, but we're just making tacos here. We're just trying to make the taco, go to the next taco. I don't know, whatever helps you kind of simplify the task at hand. For me, that always has done that. So I'm just trying to reduce some of the concepts that work for me down to just a few questions. It seems a little elementary, the who, what, why, where, when, but why do we need this power of attorney? And maybe even just taking notes as you go through one of these deals. What were the circumstances of when they signed this power of attorney? Was the power of attorney signed before there was a dementia diagnosis? I'm assuming, that would be great. Sometimes we have to get doctors involved to give us notes to say, yes, at the time I started treating this person, he was of sound mind and body. Who notarized the power of attorney? That can be an issue. If there's going to be some issue come up about all of that, we need to sometimes take a look at who actually notarized that. When was it notarized? Was it notarized just a week before they went on vacation, or was it notarized 2 years ago and now they're telling us that they're in Arizona and the flight was just yesterday? Some of this all becomes very confusing. And if it just doesn't make sense, it makes underwriters feel really uncomfortable. So that's all we're trying to do, is just make sense of the transaction. And where was the power of attorney notarized? Oftentimes this becomes very sticky in terms of where it was notarized for a variety of different reasons. So that's personally what I do. I'm just sharing with a little bit of what I like to take a look at, because this, like I said, does come up so many times, so frequently at this point. But But looking at the issue of capacity also with regard to notary, and then just in terms of having the capacity to complete the deal, it's interesting to me, and I've looked at this in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, which the term incapacitated actually has a different meaning in each state, but it's all generally about the same thing. But what does it actually mean? Well, in Oregon, incapacitated, here's the deposition. I know I love taking depositions, but this is the definition of incapacitated under the statute. And I'll let you take a look at that. But basically, a person is just unable to receive and evaluate information effectively or communicate their decisions because they're impaired. But fortunately, under the law of Oregon and Washington and Idaho, the law presumes we have capacity. So my mom is 83, and sometimes when we go, she's kind of slow, but she's very quick. She has her full mental capacity. But sometimes when we go out, maybe we go to have a meal or something, and then they look at me and they kind of ask as if she was my child, like, does she know what she wants to have for her meal or something off the menu? Well, they've obviously presumed she's incapacitated or unable of synthesizing the menu and then making a decision. We don't want to do that in our industry. And that's actually what the law tells us is we can't do that. That's against the statute. The statute says in Oregon, we presume that everyone is competent. We presume everyone is competent until there's a reason to presume that they're not competent. Or maybe they're living in assisted living, maybe they're living in a memory care facility, or maybe it has nothing to do with age at all. But until we have any reason to believe that they're not competent, the law says we presume them to be competent. And that is the basis, and that's the lens that I take whenever I look at these scenarios in terms of incapacity and powers of attorney. Under Oregon law, just having a diagnosis of dementia does not mean you are incapacitated. Memory disorders or personality changes, impaired reasoning, they might be symptoms of incapacity, but only if they're prevented from having these necessary understanding for a specific act does the presumption of capacity been overcome. So anyway, I just think that's a point worth noting. And in my own practice, no matter the deal, my perspective is I want to close every deal. I want to close every deal. And in my perspective is usually there's a way to close every deal, unless it's just completely crazy, which is really fairly rare, I'll be honest. But I look through the lens of, hey, people have the capacity to sell their own houses, and I think that's a wise way to go, personally, in my experience. On to this next one, I just want to point this out. But who decides if an individual has capacity? It's not Aaronstein's. I don't decide if someone has capacity. It's not title officers. We don't decide this. It's like I said, it's not myself. It's not people's children. I hear very frequently from people's children telling them that they need to sell their parents' house immediately, whether to afford various things or the children need someplace to live, which is often something that they're explaining, and they need to sell their parents' house to make a transition for the rest of the family. I hear that a lot. Realtors, although they get close to their customers or clientels, they're not deciding about this. Buyers, neighbors, nosy neighbors. I have lots of nosy neighbors. I live in a pretty remote area. You'd think when neighbors would be less nosy out here. They seem like they have less to do. They're even more nosy. So that's very, I like my privacy. But anyway, attorneys, so none of these. It's really a function of the court. And sometimes we have to go that route. We have to have the court establish. If we can't get comfortable as underwriters with the power of attorney or capacity to do this, that, or the other that they're asking us to do, so we can write a policy that we feel comfortable with, then that really is up to the courts. There are many people involved in any one transaction, and when there is a question as to whether or not a seller has capacity to transact, any one of these people may work to establish capacity, but we don't own ultimately that question. None of the above. Here, I just wanted to break into looking for signs of financial abuse a little bit too. And this is a little bit tracking back to that first one, and then I have a couple more claims. Our time is going by so quickly. On the title side, I like this slide because it's pretty simple. And if there is going to be a red flag for some fraud, it's pretty much going to fall under these four categories. We're going to have a recent, it should say, or uninsured deed or reconveyance. And not all of these it would necessarily trigger a red flag. Like I said before, sometimes, things just get layered on top of one another. And if you've been in this real estate business for any amount of time, I mean, like even a day, you start developing the capacity to start synthesizing facts, and your spidey senses become more capable. And so I'm really, really, really loving it when people start tapping into that. And I once worked for an attorney before I actually got into this real estate practice at this law firm. And he told me there was one rule that if I was going to work for him, he said that I would have to agree that anything anyone ever told to me in that law practice, like from the other side, was a lie. What in the world? Like, I want to believe everybody. I love people. So I believe what everybody says. So that was a little extreme. I think that's super unreasonable just to assume that everyone is absolutely lying to you all the time. But a little dose of that is super healthy, is super in our, especially in our business, in the current climate where it seems like we're getting a lot of, there's a lot of fraud coming at us from a lot of different angles. It's just keeping us on our toes, questioning if something doesn't sound right, then maybe it's not. And nobody will judge you for asking a lot of questions. That's one thing I've learned. Well, we just talked about relying on a power of attorney on its own. That is not a red flag. Just because someone has a power of attorney they want us to rely on, I don't assume there's fraud, just so you know. Is the property mortgage free? That's awesome. There's no mortgage on it. Okay, we can't assume fraud, but we do have a lot of fraud generated lately from this vacant, imposters coming in trying to sell property. Maybe people are out of state. They have some agricultural land. It's been in the family for a long time. There's no improvement on it. These fraudsters don't think anybody's looking. And so they just go out there and meet people, and then they try to put a transaction together. But on the title side, title folks are looking for this. Rarely do I see a request to sign documents outside of escrow, but back when I was doing a lot more deals kind of in, I would say, parts of King County, I was there for a period of time getting lots of requests to sign documents outside escrow. I've litigated lots of those claims. And for one reason or another, they just didn't want escrow to see the details of that transaction. And if it is closed outside escrow, it's just very hard to uncover those facts. And sometimes it can be pretty messy. So on the escrow side, we have a similar kind of things to red flags to look for, and assuming escrow is having more kind of one-on-one contact with parties. Title is a little bit behind the curtain, shall we say. So title and escrow are working together, but we're all working as a team. We're working with you. We're working with underwriting, but in my experience, I've just tried to reduce the red flag thing down here on the escrow side, and maybe it rings true for some people, and maybe they have a different kind of list, but whatever it is, this is my list. I have taken a deposition of someone who is disorientated, and the attorney on the other side told me no, she was completely fine. It was actually down in I was in Bend when I took this deposition, and the person I was taking the deposition, she asked to excuse herself to use the restroom, and She couldn't find her way back to the deposition, and I'd been saying all along that, she didn't have capacity. And of course, I'm not a doctor, but she lost her way just two doors, down from the restroom, and she made her way into the parking lot and then never came back. So I said the deposition was over, and that didn't seem very difficult for me to, conclude that I had all the information I needed at that point. So if someone seems super disorientated, and that is a red flag. People that are, maybe fearful or not allowed to speak for themselves, or maybe you can't reach somebody by the phone. I've had that happen before on litigated matters where I've called to try to talk to people, and either a son or a neighbor or someone is always interfering, and they're not letting me talk to the party that's actually trying to transact. And then this kind of urgency of the transaction thing, and this is playing. I just saw The Beekeeper, the movie. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. This is playing on the fears of a senior citizen, and there was a lot of urgency displayed in all of that, and I can't emphasize enough. We do want to close deals quickly. There's rarely a circumstance that I have been involved with where a deal has to get closed within the next few days, within a week. I know there are some efforts to be made, and there's some certain circumstances that we can get comfortable with to close it super fast, which is awesome capability on our part. It's just highlights the skill at which our title teams can work, and just the IT in general is working a lot faster these days. But if someone is really putting the screws to us to get something done and we don't know why, like what is it? Then we start poking around, kind of lifting up the leaves, what's under there. Why are they doing that? And third-party disbursements, we have to be careful about that. We never know why, like what's going on. So those are some ideas on the escrow side that we're looking at. So if we're asking you questions like why do we have to close it so quickly? Like what's the rush? If you can't answer that question, we're going to maybe be pressing you to help us get some more information. And then I know it seems I'm talking about this trend about the elderly population, but really this is just a slide to talk about what's going on in the U.S. The population of people age 65 and over grew nearly 5 times faster than the total population in the last 100 years, right? So 1920 to 2020. The older population reached 55.8 million of the population of the United States in 2020. In 2010, there were approximately 40 million people over the age of 65. In 2020, that grew to over 50 million. So you can see just how quickly, and I don't have it here. This is just from the Census Bureau. I like to get on those US government websites and just look at weird stuff too. You can do that. It's free if anything like this is of interest to you, but it kind of shows what's happening with our population 65 years and over. And after 2020, it's also trending way, way, way up. So that's why in terms of powers of attorney and dealing with elderly and estate planning, probates, all of that are popular questions for underwriters these days. So I am going to take you to a different kind of claim. I want to talk about a claim. Now, this has really absolutely nothing with ones we've talked about. So if that was of zero interest to you, hopefully maybe this might pique your interest. But anyway, so I love this little duck because I love birds, by the way. And I love ducks. I love waterfowl. And it's hilarious to me, this one, because it's like this guy, he just looks super chill. Everything's fine. But then under the water, right, his feet are just crazy, 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 crazy. And sometimes when you meet people and, they present the transaction, they present the facts as easy peasy lemon squeezy, everything's fine, and nobody's going to raise an eyebrow, nobody's going to look at this, but the parties to the transaction on the other side are really scrambling to get something sold. They're trying to make it look very clean, very simple, and sometimes under the surface there's just a lot more going on. So I think it's our job just to kind of poke around a little bit and take a look, see what else is going on under there. In this particular case, this happened a little while ago, and this actually didn't turn in This was a claim for about a day, by the way, but we made it go away pretty quick because people were acting very quickly and efficiently and bringing all the facts to the surface. But in this case, the title officer contacted underwriting to let them know that they had closed the sale on a Monday. And then basically the very next day, on the Tuesday, the new owners came by the agent's office to advise that the seller's dad came by the property and told them to stop working. They had already started working on the yard and clearing stuff out, and he had apparently filed a lawsuit against his daughter, who is the seller. So we didn't take exception to that, and I'll tell you why. Because, well, and there was nothing in the title. And we are unaware essentially, but what was in the title, we had become aware what had been litigated a little bit is there had been a petition for vulnerable adult order for protection that the dad had filed. But the title officers, in reviewing it, this was not in Deschutes, by the way, but never mind that. But anyway, this was a petition for vulnerable adult order for protection, which would seem to have absolutely nothing to do with real estate. And so these are just to explain how some of these claims come up. It's so strange. But anyway, this title officer had learned that during the title exam process, she did see the filing show up, but and she had even inquired in the Superior Court, but the court had told her it was an order for protection filed against the father of the seller, but not the seller. So we didn't show it on the preliminary commitment. But after the buyer came into the office, they pulled it up, a copy of the petition, and we sent it to underwriting, and I took a look at it, and there was a temporary restraining order filed in the case before the sale. There was a quitclaim deed that was filed 2 years ago, putting the property into the daughter's name. And these were attached to this petition for a vulnerable adult, which would have not seemed like relevant to our title inquiry. But the petition was filed before the transaction, and the dad's girlfriend alleged the dad was a vulnerable adult and his daughter should not sell her house or disrupt his belongings as he was living on the property owned by the daughter. And this was a mobile home, as it turns out. And the dad claimed his ex-wife and daughter were abusing him mentally and exploiting him financially. And he was alleging he obtained legal help from the Northwest Justice Project. Anyway, the restraining order restraining the sale of the property was actually entered in that case. And that was entered the same day as the sale, but nobody knew that. There were agents involved, but nobody knew anything having to do with this that might have impacted the sale. So we reviewed the docket carefully, which reflected a hearing that was to determine whether there was a restraining order. The hearing was ultimately held, and the daughter had counsel. Claims had not yet, we did make a title claim. Claim had not secured counsel for the hearing, but the order was denied. The office manager sent the order over dismissing the case. She sent that over to underwriting, and the office manager also advised the buyer confirmed that the dad no longer wanted to proceed with the claim, the buyer didn't want to proceed with the claim. So that was good news. There was no claim. Exhausting and kind of stressful, but that was just to highlight some of the odd ways that claims can come about. This was not a recorded instrument. It was not specifically referring to real estate at first. This was just the petition for a vulnerable adult. So that was just kind of an interesting thing, but it does highlight to me that there was a whole lot going on under the surface, none of which was brought to light until it became a big problem for the owners, who were being told to basically stop working on their property they had bought the day before, which is extremely stressful. So how do you get to know your deal? Well, there's lots of different ways, and we've kind of talked about it. Here's just another couple ideas. Who are those parties involved? And one of the ones I should have put this first is, what is the history on the property? Well, we didn't know when we were closing the deal, allegedly, that the dad had been living there. We don't need to know everybody's family business. Absolutely do not need to know everybody's family business. In that case, it did become important though, because the dad had been living there and he was essentially getting evicted, and he was pretty upset about that. And his girlfriend was very upset about that, or she wouldn't have filed that document, claiming he was a vulnerable adult and needing protection in terms of his housing. Also, does the sales price make sense? Sometimes, we sell things for less than Zillow. I don't exclusively look at any one of these. I like Redfin, I like Zillow. I like sometimes to just look at three or four of these. I look at taxes, that isn't even accurate. Everything seems a little bit discombobulated from my perspective these days, and it depends on the market or the community that you're into. But you, as experts, if it doesn't make sense to you, what someone's asking for, or if it doesn't make sense to us, then that is going to be something that we're going to be asking about. Like in my first example, that was about 100,000 less. Apparently, that property had been abandoned for a while. There had been some pets that had been abandoned in there too. We don't know. Maybe there was a big mess. So maybe it makes sense. We don't need to know everybody's business, but if we're going to be issuing a title insurance policy, insuring a liability amount, so if there is a claim, then we want to know, something that's reasonable. We don't need an appraisal in every instance, certainly not. But what it is, the sales price making sense? That is something that I look at. And who is the contact? Are you dealing with the actual vested owner, or are you dealing with an LLC? Who is the manager of the LLC? Are you dealing with that person? Have you seen the LLC agreement? Along those lines. I love these questions. I have one more for you, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I like this little guy. He smells a scam. I love that. And we all just need to be on the lookout for these. But if it smells like, it probably is us. So there you go. In this particular claim, this is a few years ago, and we were asked to insure a transaction with an uninsured quitclaim deed. So there had been no insurance. There was just a quitclaim deed in the record, and it was from an LLC to an individual. And the LLC, turns out, after some investigation, had been involved in a criminal matter in California. Fraudsters had apparently, as the story goes, had bought a victim a few margaritas and offered $500,000 reverse mortgage on a property worth $2 million. So the victim only received $1,000 in cash and signed the quitclaim deed in favor of the LLC, solely owned by this particular fraudster. So that's where the uninsured quitclaim deed came from. It came from this situation where the victim only got $1,000. The quitclaim deed falsely stated the victim had been paid $800,000 for the property. Anyway, she never received the money and claims didn't know she was signing, and she claimed that she didn't know she was signing over the ownership of the property, but the fraudsters recorded the quitclaim deed and paid the delinquent property taxes. It was a whole thing. She was in financial distress, and that's another thing below the surface, these little duck feet swimming around. If someone is in financial distress, they deserve to be treated with dignity and time, their resources, your expertise to help them navigate. Just as in any circumstances, we want to give people the benefit of a super successful transaction. And so anyway, that can be a red flag. If you know someone is in financial distress, they might lean quickly to something that's not in their best interest. And we look for that on our end, not because we're calling the police all the time, but because, eventually sometimes people are in financial distress. They do have loved ones. And oftentimes those loved ones, if they're taken advantage, hire lawyers, and title and escrow get sued. Lots of people get sued. And I also hate being involved in lawsuits when claims of that nature. But anyway, the county's recorder office reported the sale to the police. That's how it was found out. Great team members, those recorder's office. So that's awesome. They were looking out, and because the sales price was so far below the market value was $2 million. And we did incline to insure that transaction involving that LLC. Hooray. So there was no litigation for title in escrow, but it was a big unfortunate circumstance for that particular person. Before we open it up for questions, I want to talk a little bit about wire fraud. This is more like just a reminder. I don't have any sad wire fraud cases to tell you. They're all kind of like the same fact scenario. There's an email. It tells you to wire your money to the wrong place, and then the money is lost. And it happens just more often than you think. It's very sad, and it's just painful for me to even talk about, really. But one way we can stop talking about it is we can just, do our best to follow these are just, I've reduced it to 4 suggestions here. Don't rely on emails purporting to change the wire instructions. Just tell this to your customers over and over and over again. We try to be super clear about that with everyone that we're dealing with, but never rely on emails purporting to change the wire instructions. And if there is an email changing wire instructions, go ahead and call somebody. Tell your clients to call you right away. Verifying wire instructions, using complex email passwords. I wish there was more education about passwords, but the recommendation now is to make your passwords greater than 8 characters. I used to like to do my passwords. I like hello or goodbye, like the season, and then the year, and then a bunch of exclamation points, like goodbye spring, 2022, and then 2 exclamation points. Well, and then I was explaining my clever thing to my boss the other day. We were visiting some agents, and he's like, "Oh, that's like the easiest thing in the world, because once the fraudsters catch on to your pattern, then they can, they're quickly going to be able to go through and find all of those." So I thought that I was being clever, but instead, I've learned that as often as I think about this, I still hadn't found something that was easy to remember and something that fraudsters just couldn't maybe tap into quickly. And using multi-factor authentication for your email accounts, it's getting easier to do that on your iPhone with the Face Identity or Okta or various ways to use multi-factor authentication. Whenever anyone prompts you, any company, to do that, I would take advantage of that and suggest to your customers that they do the same. So anyway, I want to leave we have 10 minutes for questions. If anybody has a question about the slides or something in their own practice, and help yourself.
Aaron, we just have one comment currently in the chat where a realtor said had a transaction where the seller owed restitution and had a large judgment against them. The judgment didn't show up on the title search. As a realtor, is there anything we should have done?
So was this and I'm not sure if I need to type this into the chat, but was this restitution a criminal restitution?
Let me go ahead and unmute Connie. Connie's the one
Sure.
that's allowed is
Hi,
asking
Connie.
the question. Connie, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Connie, that's a great question. And these criminal restitution things, they don't come up very often, but when they do come up, they can be these restitution amounts can be large. I don't know how much this judgment was for, but just thinking about it, I don't know if there was a search in the Superior Court records to see if the judgment could have been found that way. I'm a big proponent of recording these, but if it was simply missed and it was not found through a search of the records, really, I've had some success with these, contacting the court and explaining the situation in terms of the transaction. But if the money has already been dispersed, then it can become a problem. But as a realtor, is there anything we should have done? I mean, unless you just can't assume everyone is a criminal. Sometimes what I do, I have this kind of people search thing, and you can have a membership to it, and you can run people's name just because it's like a background thing. And sometimes situations come up in work, or even, for example, with my kids, they have a new coach for something. I run their name through there just to see if they have some kind of criminal background. I'm just kind of fascinated by people's details. And so sometimes I take the extra step of doing that. I mean, it's like a monthly subscription or something to take a look at like who people are. If you want to get to know your customers better, that's something you can do. Asking people if they have any judgments that you could be aware of. But otherwise, if there's kind of your best, yeah, you learned after the fact. Yeah, and if that was a judgment of record and it got missed, then that may amount to a title claim, unfortunately. Is that what happened? Was there a claim made? And I would say that sometimes restitution, it can be for a variety of different things. Like sometimes, whether it's a domestic violence, whether it's family, we see restitution that way. DUI often, oh, which one do I use? I could look on my, oh shoot, you know what, I'll look it up.
And
I
if you
use,
don't have it, Aaron, you can send it to me and I can send it
yeah,
out with the certificate.
oh, I use check people.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. There's a lot of them out there, and some of them they take you through these multiple layers of spiraling through all this weird stuff, and you wait and da da da. This is just like something I like to bring up, and it's quick, it's easy, and it's fairly thorough. And then, and it also has where people have lived before, and I find that interesting too. Like, if people do they generally just travel around and they move different places? Like, I don't want to be super suspicious. If someone tells me they really just moved here from California, I tend to believe them, but sometimes we learn different things as we get to know people, and some of the frauds that I've come to examine, especially actually in Deschutes, actually, it's super interesting. You have people coming and going from all over. It's not just California, um, and so they have relatives all over too, and where people are sometimes matters in terms of trying to get deals done, and so that's interesting to me. So that's what I use. I use check people. And that doesn't always tell you if you have a judgment, but it does sometimes tell you if you have a big criminal history. And then you can also pass it along to the title unit, and they can check too, if for criminal cases in terms of either pending criminal activity or if a judgment's been entered. So, and I don't mean to go on and on. I want to have another question, but these criminal restitution things, sometimes they don't enter the amount, and then you have to call the court to find out because it's just running in the background. But anyway, you're welcome.
I don't currently see any other questions. Does anyone have any more questions for Aaron? Why we have her?
Yeah, has anyone seen anything? Um,
I don't see any additional questions there, Aaron. So I just want to say
yep,
thank you very much for the information and everything you provided today. Um, we're getting some comments. Just a big thank you. Great class.
yeah,
So with that, everyone who's still on, we will have your certificates within a few days, no later than Tuesday next week. Should have them even sooner than that, but no later than Tuesday, you'll have those in your inbox. So if you have any questions or follow up, go ahead and pass those on, and I'm happy to pass those to Aaron. Uh, we've recorded this class. We'll post it to our website. If you have someone in your office that wanted to watch it, if they want CE credit, they can contact us and schedule a viewing. Otherwise, if they're not worried about CE credit and just want to review the information, it'll be on our website here by this afternoon. So you can check back and see, watch the presentation or review it again if you need more information. With that, thank you again for all your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron. And we wish you the rest of your week to be a very successful one. So have a great weekend.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.